back, guys. In this lecture, we are going to learn about the immediately invoked function expressions. So let's understand what are these and why they are used. Okay, so let's get into it. So let's say we have to create a function which we want to execute only once. Okay, and we don't want to execute it again. Then how we can do that? We can simply create a function like this, and then let's log something. Okay, now if I call it like this, then you will see we are getting our log in the browser's console log. Okay, but you guys will think like we can also execute it multiple times as much as we want, right? Because nothing is stopping us to call this function multiple times, right? That is why the IIFE was introduced. Okay, so let me show you what is an IIFE. So in IIFE, what we do, we simply write a function like this, and as you can see, we started getting an error here. Okay, require a function name, but we don't want to give it any name, otherwise we can call it like we did here, right? So what we will do, we will trick JavaScript by wrapping this function statement into the parenthesis. Okay, so now JavaScript will think this is an expression. Okay, so now if I need to comment this, and yeah, so now you guys will think like how we can call it. What we have to do now is we just need to call the way we call the functions with the function name, right? Here we have a function name and we call it with the help of these parentheses. So same thing we have to do here. So right now we have converted this particular function into an expression. Okay, so this particular thing is an expression now, and we can call this expression with the parenthesis. That is why it is called immediately invoked. Immediately invoked because we are invoking it here, and function expression because we have a function, we have converted it into the expression. Okay, so this is immediately invoked function expression. Okay, and as you can see, we are getting the console log here. Okay, I like the name here as well. It is also called IIFEs. Okay, it's a short form, and yeah, this will also work with the arrow functions. Okay, let me show you. So let's say I want to call this function, and then this will also call once. Okay, so now if I try to use the parenthesis, I'll get the error obviously because I have not used the parenthesis. Right now this whole thing is a statement. Okay, so now we will convert it into the expression by wrapping it into the parenthesis. Intermediate values, something is okay. So yeah, here we have to use this colon, otherwise it will think like this is also a part of this particular function expression, right? That is why we were getting that error there. Okay, so this way we can create the function expressions, immediately invoked function expressions. Okay, so now why we need these immediately invoked function expressions? Okay, so if you remember in behind the scene sections, I have talked about scopes, right? And functions create these scopes. And what happens is sometimes we need some variables which cannot be accidentally manipulated by the outer scripts or by the outside code. Okay, so for that we create these scopes. Okay, and as much as we know, the scopes only works from inner scope to the outer scope. That means we can access the variables which are outside from one of the inner scope. That means if there is some variable, we can access it inside of a function, okay? But if there is a variable which is inside of this function, we cannot access it outside because of the scope which got created by that particular function. And let me show you one example of that, okay? So let's create a variable. Let's say restricted, okay? And then let's store some value, let's say hi, okay? And if we try to access it outside, then we will get an error saying uncaught reference error. That means the JavaScript is unable to find this particular variable in the current scope. But if we have defined it outside, let's comment it out. And then if we try to access it inside of the function, then it will work, right? Because the scope chain works from inner scope to the outer scope. So that is why sometimes we want the data privacy, and this whole thing which we did here is called data encapsulation, okay? We encapsuled the data which is inside of this function within the block which we created, within the scope which we have created with the help of this function, okay? So data encapsulation and the data privacy are one of the important topics in JavaScript or in any coding language, and we are going to discuss about these topics in detail in the object oriented programming section, okay? And if you remember, like we have learned in the behind the scenes section, like let and const variables also create their own scope, okay? And let me show you how. So to create a scope for let and const variables, we simply need a curly braces, okay? And it will create a scope for let and const variables. Data 1, let's say, and let's say 12, okay? And let's use const as well. Const data 2, let's say true, okay? So now if we try to log it outside, then it will simply not work because these are scoped within this particular block, okay? So data 1, and then let's log data 2 as well, and you can already see we are started getting the error in the console log, and that is because data 1 is not defined because these two variables are restricted in this particular block, okay? So in modern JavaScript, most of the times we use these particular blocks to scope some variables and to make data privacy, okay? So this particular thing is not used that much in modern JavaScript. And why we need this if we don't use it that much? So let's say you wanna run a piece of code only once. You have some scenario where you want to trigger a function only once. So in that case, you can use the IIFEs, okay? And we will see a nice use case of IIFEs in one of the future lectures where we will be using it along with the async await. Then this will make much more sense, okay? So now I wanted to tell you one more thing, guys. Like this particular IIFE is not a feature of JavaScript. It is just a pattern with which some developers came up, and then later other developers started adopting it. Okay? Other developers also started using this. So this is just a pattern. This is not a JavaScript feature. Okay? So we are basically tricking here with the parenthesis, the JavaScript. Okay? So this is it about the immediately invoked function expressions. Okay? So yeah, see you there.